could get used to carrying an axe around. I have a feeling I might regret this.
Murderer! Axe-wielding psychopath right here!
Shh, shh, shh. You'll wake up the other trees.
She's got an axe! Run! She's a murderer!
Okay, look. I'm getting rid of the axe, okay? Just stop screaming, please.
Ow! My trunk! I'm losing sap!
Murderer!
As you could probably guess, if you look at my past reviews both here on GameSpoils and my Tolka Fox channel, when I heard that Tim Schafer, one of the creators of such classic point-and-click games as Monkey Island, Day of the Tentacle, Full Throttle, the always fantastic Grim Fandango, and not to forget one of my favorite games of all times, Psychonauts, was running a Kickstarter with the intent of making a point-and-click adventure game, well, it took all of half a thought before I tossed a few bucks at it. Then, content in the fact that it was being made, I promptly ignored the whole thing. Oh, sure, I heard about it being delayed, the second Kickstarter, the humble bundle sale, the game being split into acts with only Act 1 coming out first, and all of that. Game development can be a tricky thing. Delays are normal. So long as it hadn't been cancelled, it's just not worth worrying about. But now that Act 1 is out in the wild, was it worth the wait? Well, the best way I can think of judging this one is to take a look at my expectations from back when I kickstarted it and see how it stacks up. So, what is it that I look for in a Tim Schafer game? How about a strange and unique but striking visual style that may be a little jarring at first, but ends up being excellent? Well, yeah, the joint-based animation bugged me at first, but it really comes across as this storybook illustration style that's really quite striking. The second thing is pretty obvious. Pointing, clicking, and the ability to use things on other things. Okay, I know this one's kind of basic, but with this trend of adventure games going for a more cinematic experience over the exploration, puzzle-filled experience of the older titles, can you really blame me? Sure, the cinematic thing can work. Just look at Telltale's The Walking Dead. But it's a different sort of adventure game. This, thankfully, is point-and-click in the traditional sense. It's exactly what I wanted. So, how about strange, unusual, and memorable characters who leave a lasting impression regardless of their importance? Really, this should be a no-brainer. This is something Tim Schafer is always good with.
Somewhere exciting for a change.
So yes. What about strange and unusual situations that shouldn't make sense ever, yet they do in the context of the game?
Can you help me kill Mog Chothra?
Ah, what a thing to say.
Do they have the potentially disturbing scenarios treated as innocent, mundane, or even whimsical, making them even more bizarre?
Direction. Please, don't be hasty in your decision, my lord. Oh, yes, take your time, look over all your options, and then, after some careful consideration...
How about the massive plot twist that makes everything suddenly make sense that you should have seen coming yet somehow didn't? It has everything. This is easily on the same level as the old classics, and I loved it. Well, they even managed to design the game in such a way that the interactive items, their use, and where to click is all conveyed by visual cues and context, with only a mouse-over indicator. Not some sort of glowing overlay that shows you all the hot spots. So the designers can be really lazy with the design, like every freaking point-and-click that comes out these days.
Emergency rations?
However,
I think that's overrated.
even with all that praise, that's not to say that the game is without flaws.
Why am I wasting time?
So let me shelf my bias for a moment and take a deeper look.
Not going back
The game focuses on two characters with two distinctly different and not obviously connected storylines. At least not until the end of Act 1. On one hand, you have Valoria. The world she inhabits is this fantastical fantasy setting with cloud-walking shoes and girls who are depressed about not being eaten by the giant monster. On the other side, you have Shay, who inhabits a science fiction setting, butting heads with a computer who insists on being extremely protective. At the start of the game, you get to pick which one of the two stories you want to start with. You can even switch between the two characters at any time. There's only one problem with that. With how little connection the two stories have in Act 1, what you end up with is two completely isolated stories, with the same basic difficulty curve throughout both of them. Since they didn't know which one you would do first, and realistically no reason at all to swap between the two of them. In my case, I played through the entirety of Valoria's story before even touching Shay's. So, basically, just when the puzzle was starting to get interesting, I'm slapped back down to the super easy starter difficulty again. Sure, plot-wise, I didn't lose out on anything other than a few minor potential connecting references, and I suppose the option to flip between the two scenarios if you get stuck or annoyed with something in one, so you can just do the other one, that's an argument for that. But at least in Act 1, I can't help but think that this feature is just wasted. And it may have been a better experience overall, with control alternating at fixed points to smooth out both the difficulty curve and to help with the overall narrative just a little bit. They could very well be planning to make the two stories much more intertwined in Act 2, making the character switching much more relevant to the gameplay. But in Act 1, that's just not the case, and this also sort of leads into the other thing I can't help but wonder about, and that's the length. I hesitate to bring this up, but I finished Act 1 in about 3.5 hours. All indicators I can find seem to be that this is about half the game, which would place the full game in around 8 hours. That's not horrible, actually, I have to admit. Telltale games, for example, tend to be around that length for a similar price point. But it's not great either. And with the potentially long, very long, especially after the cliffhanger ending there, wait for the next part, it could make the overall length feel all the shorter. So here's really hoping that Act 2 has a bit more meat to it. But that is something we will only know once Act 2 is actually released. Until then, all we have is Act 1, and short as it is well crafted, with little to no wasted space or padding to it. And I found it quite enjoyable. For that, I give it a rating of highly recommended. I wouldn't blame someone for wanting to wait until the whole game's out before picking it up. In fact, in some cases, I might recommend it. But based on what's here, I can easily see this being on my best adventure games of all time list. If you have any interest in this game at all, do yourself a favor, pick it up, enjoy the ride. This is the closest you're going to get to an adventure game from the heyday of point and clicks, and for me, that is exactly what I wanted. Now, Double Fine, please hurry up with Act 2 so I can find out what happens next. This wait is going to suck.
How did I manage to win second place that time?